We'll see what happens. King. Here, I just did something. Can you hear anything? Because I don't think I can hear it.
1 second. Is it still the same link?
Did something. Did sung? Can you hear anything?
Nope,
You don't hear it?
I do not.
Okay. I also do not hear it. So good.
We'll see if we can get through it.
Yeah, right. Shit. So I went with noise suppression. Let me see if I can turn off the compressor. And see if that does anything. Okay. I think we're good. All right. I think we're good. So sorry about this.
Hey, you're fine.
This is the one.
You always gotta
this
expect technical difficulties.
this is the one. My sugar. My sugar. So anyway. uh, gosh, like, can you turn your camera on and off? You're killing me with that look.
Are you serious? Is it
Yeah.
froze again?
Yeah, and it's probably the most melancholy thing I've ever seen in my life. It's so funny. That's better. All right. Anyway, we're here. We're here.
We're here. We were
We
talking about T1.
okay. Anyway, so yeah, welcome to Action Jack-Offs, episode 1. This is the talk show where we talk about our favorite and some of the best action movies ever of all time. The ones that we enjoy the most, the ones that we like. And the first one that we're going to start with is arguably one of the best and quintessential movies of all time, but in the action genre specifically, this movie kicks ass.
It's among the best. I
Yeah,
love it a lot.
we're talking
It's
about
what we're here to talk
Terminator
about. Here to talk about T1, baby.
T1.
It's exactly what we're here to talk about, and that's what we're here to do. I love it a lot. My hot take, right off the gates, better than the second one.
I agree. I
It's
agree.
amazing.
I love it.
I love
Um,
the grounded take on it. I love that it feels like an indie film, and as we're getting more and more into the sequel culture and the MCU and all that, it's good to go back to our roots. Back when we could have a blockbuster movie that was just simple.
I agree.
When you could
Um,
just be like, hey, robots, future, save, present. That was all you needed.
I agree. Yeah. No, this movie's great. This movie is start to finish a masterpiece, and I think that everything it sets out to do, it does it right. Everything it wants to do, it does it well. All on a pretty small budget um, of about 6.4 mil. But
That's that's just a toss in the pan these days.
yeah, um, but it made approximately $78.3 million in the box office. So it was one of the most. Um, it was I think it was the number one at the box office for like several weeks, for at least like 3 or 4 weeks straight. Um,
It's a good
and
start for our boy James.
yeah, yeah. So this is James Cameron's first finished directorial debut. He did work on a movie right before this in Italy. He was working on Piranha 2 as like his first big project, but there's something that happened. So apparently this movie came to James Cameron in a dream. It was some nightmare he was having where he was being attacked by some robot that had come from the future and was trying to kill him.
Which is, that's a one in a million.
As you do.
Imagine just making it. And they were just like, "Hey, James, go follow your dreams." And he was like, "I don't think you want me to."
Yeah, no, it's certainly a it's certainly like one of those movies. It's one of those stories where dreams really do come true. He made it he made it a reality. So I think that's really funny. Um, but interestingly enough, the people that were behind this, so the production for this movie is actually really interesting, and I wanted to get into that because obviously, like, we talk about the movie in general, action jack-offs, all we're about is like the action and the action movies, but I wanted to get into the production because I think the production for this movie is actually very interesting. Um,
Hey, teach me a lesson, buddy.
so James Cameron had wrote the script, and he had actually written the script, and he had gotten some other like writing credits from some other people like Gail Ann Hurd, who would obviously like she would go on to produce the movie. Uh, but other writing credits include what was his name? Will Garner or William Wisher, who was James Cameron's roommate at the time, I believe. But so James Cameron writes the script based on the dream he had, where a robot tries to come and kill him, and of course he's also trying to what a marvelous misadventure in the chat. But he's also trying to um take inspiration from like other movies, and one of the inspirations he was taking from was John Carpenter's Halloween, uh, which obviously has some very interesting parallels to Terminator if we're talking about an unstoppable killer character just going after a woman he's trying to kill, right?
Oh,
Um,
and you could really feel it in some of the scenes.
oh, for sure, just like a
You could really feel the inspiration.
huge hulking guy going around trying to um, kill people and just like do all this crazy shit. Um, but obviously with Terminator, they obviously lean more into like the science fiction aspect of it. But the let's see here, I had it written down somewhere in my notes. Da, 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 da. Let's see here. The production basically played out that he was taking the, if I remember correctly, he's taking the script from studio to studio to studio. Nobody wants it. Nobody really cares about it. A lot of people, and this is an interesting stigma that was surrounding the Terminator movie at the time, is that a lot of people, including a lot of the people that were acting in it, just kind of thought it was a very B movie esque um, film. It was just very schlocky, and that's in part because a lot of the people that were working on this also worked in a lot of those Roger Corman movies, like Roger Corman's production company. And if for those of you that don't know, Roger Corman was a famous like B movie director. He's a B movie producer and such like that. He made a lot of like really crazy B movies like Wasp Woman and just all those other kinds of trashy movies. So coming out of that, James Cameron eventually stumbles across Gail Ann Hurd, who was working for the Roger Corman production company as Roger Corman's like assistant producer or something like that. Um, and then going into uh, meeting James Cameron, she likes the script, right? And that's another thing is one of the reasons that the movie didn't get made beforehand is that James Cameron was adamant about wanting to be the director, but nobody wanted him to be the
Big
director.
production companies don't like that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, big production companies don't want someone whose last project that he worked on was a movie called Piranha 2 and he didn't even finish it.
Nobody's gonna buy into that.
Exactly. Nobody wants that. Nobody likes that. So what ends up happening is he meets Galen Hurd. Galen Hurd says, "I will, I will buy the script. I will help produce the movie, and you can be the director. but you have to sell me the script for $1. So James Cameron, without really much ado about anything, you know, he's very passionate about wanting to make this movie. He needs to make this movie happen, but uh, he doesn't know if he wants to sell it for $1. But eventually, he's just like he kind of caves in. He's like, all right, fine, here's $1, sell it. And of course, years and years and years later, if I'm not mistaken, James Cameron, I'm trying to find his exact quote, but he basically said that he hated it. He thought it was one of the worst decisions he had ever made.
It was the
Bec-
price of a Hollywood education.
exactly, because what ends up happening is he kind of loses the right to making this movie. Oh, we're talking about the Terminator, 1984. We're talking about the Terminator. James Cameron's the Terminator, and we're kind of just going into like the backstory of the production history here. Um, but so then he basically so by doing that deal, he loses the rights to the Terminator, which is why he doesn't own the rights to movies like Terminator 3, Salvation, Genesis. That's why he's not really attached to any of those projects. It's because he technically doesn't have the rights to Terminator, which obviously is
Sad
something.
world we live in.
Yeah, it being like a billion-dollar industry, billion-dollar franchise now is obviously something to look back on and kind of be pissed off about. Um, but I just thought that was really interesting because then we go into the actual making of the movie, and the making of the movie is obviously so much interesting, uh, almost as interesting as the movie itself. Obviously, the movie's great, um, but I really like the uh, part where we're moving from that pre-production era where we're signing all these contracts and doing all this stuff, um, and moving into like now we're sort of in like production phase. So the company that produced the movie was Orion, and as far as I can tell, the producers at Orion, who were kind of like funding the movie and getting the movie made, they didn't really want anything to do with the movie. They thought it was going to be schlocky B movie crap, and they were very hands off, which actually obviously worked out in James Cameron's favor because there wasn't a lot of studio interference. But the one thing that is that was probably the really the only studio interference that Orion dished James Cameron's way was that they said that you need to make the relationship between Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese a lot more believable.
Just got to have a little bit of a love story to make the producers happy.
Yeah, because I almost wonder what that initial script would have looked like. And from what I understand, the script in general was a lot different than it
It
is
was it was
than the
it
final
was a lot more
product.
similar to what T2 ended up being.
Right, right. Yeah, there
It
was
was supposed to be two Terminators,
two Terminators.
so it was less a chance for a love story, unless they were going with a woman in a machine.
Yeah, and what's more interesting is that they decided that they couldn't do the liquid Terminator because the technology wouldn't have been there. It was the early '80s. There was no way they were going to be able to do it
It,
right. And so
it
going
just
into
wasn't there yet,
yeah, it just wasn't there
which
yet.
is what makes T2 so good.
Yeah, and obviously, yeah, T2 has its own strengths, and there's two Terminators in that, and there's a lot of stuff like we'll get into when we get into the deleted scenes in the cutting room floor category. We'll start talking about like a lot of the stuff that was filmed and just got left out. But that is one of the things that got cut out of the script. Um, but speaking of the effects, I do want to go over the effects real quick because obviously I think for early '80s and for
Oh, it still holds up.
it still holds up. Like the effects in Terminator still hold up.
There's one or two shots. There's one or two shots we'll talk about later that are a
You're
little
talking
bit
about the
wonky.
head. You're talking about Arnold's
No,
head.
I like that one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
No,
That's my favorite
I
one.
have
That's
that
my favorite
one.
one.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have that written down for later, but we'll talk about that in a second. But I think for the most part, the special effects, the more practical ones, hold up way better than like some CGI in older movies do.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like it a lot. Let me see here if I can just. Ooh, ooh. Nope, didn't want to do that.
Doop, doop, doop.
Where are you?
Oh, I don't know.
Sorry. Anyway, yeah, I didn't mean to get off track there. Anyway,
You.
what I was trying to say was,
Let's talk about the effects.
yeah. So the effects were done by Stan Winston's company, Stan Winston Company. Also, some credit goes to
The
Gene Warner.
legendary Stan Winston.
Legendary Stan Winston. For those of you that don't know, Stan Winston would go on to win his first Academy Award in James Cameron's next film, Aliens. And then other works include Edward Scissorhands, Predator, Terminator 2, obviously, Jurassic Park, where he got his other Academy Award. He won another Academy Award for that. So I thought that was
Don't
really
leave out
interesting.
Lake Placid.
Yeah. Lake
Got to
Lake
throw out
Place.
in my hat for Lake Placid.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, that's
He did
cool.
the crocodile in that one. Come on,
Um,
let me
so
throw it out.
so let's see here. So specifically, uh, Stan Winston. Here it is. I've got so many notes
He
here.
also did Pumpkinhead,
He did do This is his
throwing
directorial
out,
debut. Yeah,
throwing out some other ones.
yeah. No. Specifically, duh, 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 duh. So what's his face? Stan Winston. He did all the effects, like the head and the life-sized Terminator robot model.
The full Skeletor.
Yes, and the other guy who gets credit for the special effects, Gene Warner, he did all the sequences that were set in 2029, so like all the Kyle Reese flashbacks and the opening scene and such. And he also did all the stop motion. So whenever the robot is
Which we
moving,
love to see. I was so excited when I saw it. I was like, oh, I forgot there's stop motion towards the end.
yeah, yeah, it's great. Well, also the um I thought maybe I'm misremembering, and I just saw the movie. But the when they're doing the flashback scene in 2029, where there's that giant, what does he call them? The HKs?
Yeah,
Isn't that
the
stop
hunter
motion?
killers.
Yeah, isn't that stop motion, or is that just?
I believe that's a model that they're superimposing.
Gotcha, 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 gotcha.
They might have a scene or two, but I believe that and the flyby hunter Terminator. I believe both of those are like models that they have on ropes or something.
Yeah, but he was still responsible for all that, so that's really interesting.
Hmm.
It's so interesting that there's so many talented people that were working on this project. Obviously, I already mentioned Gail Ann Hurd, Gene Warner, Stan Winston, obviously being an Academy Award winner, James Cameron. Talk about James Cameron, who had a absolutely fire '80s run. He had the trifecta: Terminator, Aliens, and The Abyss, starring Ed Harris.
Dude,
All of
and
them.
Abyss then having starting his love for the ocean world that he
Yeah,
would later return to.
all of them. All three of them featuring Michael Biehn.
He loves that guy.
Yeah, so we have Kyle Reese, Colonel Hicks, and I forget his name in The Abyss. I just started The Abyss. I had never seen it. I started
Oh, you
watching it.
haven't seen that one?
I started watching it
Classic.
for this podcast
One
so
of
I
my
could
favorite
briefly talk about
VHSs.
it, but I only got like 25 minutes in.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Y-
It's real slow compared to today's movies, but it's a good one.
It definitely has like that James Cameron era writing, which is so interesting because
Hmm.
going back to Terminator, it's very downplayed and mellow compared to like his later, more signature style of writing,
Oh, for sure.
where it's like very quippy all the time.
He's finding his voice. There's not as much comedy quibs in this one.
No, yeah, it's a lot
It's more
more.
comedy timing.
Yeah, yeah, and it's obviously like like with characters like Kyle Reese in the Terminator. Obviously, there's not like much quip, but like you said,
Not as
it's
much.
in the timing. Like later on when the
Hmm.
Terminator's in his room and
And then,
that guy knocks on the door and he
uh-huh.
says, "Fuck,"
There's some jokes.
he says, "Fuck you, asshole."
It's so good. I love that one a lot. Or just the cops whenever he's like when he takes a sip of the coffee and he's like, it's 3 hours old and I put a cigarette out in it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that that
There's a
one
lot of
made
good
me laugh.
lines. There's a lot of good
They
lines.
deliver it so dry.
So let's get into the casting a little bit. Some great
Let's
cast.
get
This is
into the
probably one of the
casting.
best casts of the 1980s for an action movie because everybody seems to have their shining moment here. Um, Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor,
Oh, fantastic. What a performance.
fantastic. She
So
was
believable when she's
great.
going crazy. And what a transformation for the second movie.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's funny too because you can kind of see towards like the final scene of the movie where they're running from the Terminator, and
Hmm.
Reese is like kind of like down, and she has to like pick him up and
Get
drag him
on your
away.
feet, soldier!
Yeah, you can kind of see like the glimpse of that. I thought that was really interesting.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to see here because I had it had something about the casting for Sarah Connor. Oh yeah, possible castings for Sarah Connor. We had Melissa Sue Anderson, who played Mary Ingle in Little House on the Prairie, and another one that I thought was really interesting, Leah Thompson, who played the mom in Back to the Future.
Oh, would have loved to see it.
That would have been really interesting. I
Imagine hitting both of those in the 80s. Just being like, oh yeah, star of Terminator and star of Back to the Future.
Oh yeah, I
Or
think,
in Back to the Future, not necessarily the star,
but
but it would have been a
she was one of the
crazy
main
home run.
characters. Yeah, no,
Oh yeah.
that would have been great. That would have been a great dual like set of roles, like the dichotomy between the two,
Hmm.
especially when you get to T2. But
Of
obviously that
course.
there would have been a lot of scheduling conflicts had that come to fruition. Um, Linda Hamilton sprained her ankle a week before filming. She had to be taped
It's a real
up.
win.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of apparently like a lot of scenes where she's like when she feels pain. That's real. She had to be taped up, and all scenes of her running were pushed back as far in the schedule as possible because she was in constant pain.
See, I love when we hear stories about this in old movies. Like you hear Morgan Freeman being like, you know that baseball scene in Shawshank threw my arm out. You're
Yeah,
just like, man, they just did these actors these days. They don't build them like this anymore. You know, they
which
used to just power through it.
now that I'm thinking about that, because of the way they had to like do the filming schedule out of order to work around her injury, it kind of explains that little. There's a little bit of movie flub. And the movie's great. It doesn't take away from the flub. It doesn't take me out of my immersion. But something that I thought was really interesting is multiple times throughout the movie, Kyle Reese will either have a shadow of facial hair or he'll be completely shaven. And I
Oh, see, I didn't even notice.
yeah, like I think that's because a lot of the scenes where they go back and have them running or where they're just like for instance when they're in the car garage hiding from the Terminator for the first time, he has like a shadow in that, but then like at some point later, like when they're running down the alleyway, right? He's clean shaven.
Hmm.
So
Silly.
yeah, it's very interesting. But Linda Hamilton, man, she killed it. She killed it in the role. I don't think anybody else could have been Sarah Connor. I think she plays it really down to
She's too
earth,
iconic now.
really down to earth and sweet. Yeah, she's too iconic as Sarah Connor though, which is really interesting. Do you think that her being that iconic of a character has hurt her career in any way?
It most of the time it does.
I agree. I
But then you get the residual checks and they ask you to come
agree.
back a few more times.
They pay you an extra couple mil just to show up in a movie.
You get to go to the Comic Cons. Like it's one of those give and takes. You get one thing, but you don't get the other.
True. Um. So yeah, what's yeah, what I really like about her performance is just how, I mean, like it feels to me when I watch her, it feels like she's just genuinely just going on this roller coaster. Like she's being told by this dude who might be crazy that there's a robot coming from the future to kill her because she's going to give
I
birth to
like
the
to
future savior.
I like to when I rewatched it this time. I liked to pick like put myself in the position of like, all right, pretend like you've never seen this before, and or don't know anything, and being like, yeah, what if this guy was just crazy?
Yeah.
And the movie didn't like there wasn't a robot.
Yeah.
She
I would
does
love
such a
it.
good job of being like in the moment.
I would love it if there was a cut of the movie where it cuts out all the stuff, all the scenes from the future, all the times you see the Terminator and his robot parts showing, and then the movie ends with
And you don't know for sure.
and the movie ends with like the truck explosion, right?
Yeah,
Instead of like where the robot comes out of the shell and chases them around the
yeah,
factory.
yeah,
I think that would be a great cut because then it makes it's the Terminator, but Kyle Reese is crazy.
yeah.
Yeah. I think
That's
that
great.
I
I
think
love
that
that a lot.
I think that would be so funny.
That's our first project.
Yeah, yeah. We got to do that
We just
somehow.
edit the film real hard.
We got to figure that out. How that's gonna work out. No,
Love it.
I think that would just
But
be so funny.
to go back to casting, I was reading a thing where originally they wanted Arnold to play the Reese character, but once
Yeah.
James Cameron saw him, he was just like, "Oh no, I have a different idea."
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was a really interesting. So Arnold, we'll get into like the whole like Arnold and stuff. But yeah, apparently like they were talking, and there was something about like the way he was talking. I think he was talking about robots. He was talking about like the future and stuff. Um, it was just something crazy like that. And James Cameron was like, "Oh, this guy would make a great Terminator, just like the way he speaks." Because initially, from what I understand, when Arnold was brought in for the role of Terminator, um, James Cameron was really against the idea. But then he met him, and then everything kind of changed, um, which I thought was really interesting. Um, but in terms of the Kyle Reese role, uh, I thought this was really fascinating. Um, a lot of people were considered for the role of Kyle Reese, not just Arnold. Obviously, Arnold was like the big name that they had brought
Oh, of
in
course.
for it. But a lot of other characters, a lot of other actors that would go on to be uh, even more famous, arguably after this movie, because a lot of these guys were famous either right before this movie or they were just now starting to get their start. But some of the possible castings for Kyle Reese were Christopher Reeve,
Love
Kurt.
to see it.
Oh, I know, Superman versus a Terminator. That
It
would have been badass.
would have been great.
That would have been awesome.
He
Kurt.
was the physically fit for it.
He was. I mean, think about that. He's technically taller than Arnold, but he's not as buff
Hmm.
as Arnold. It would actually have made the Terminator seem like almost less of a threat, almost.
Yeah, but they could have framed it to where he looked taller, or Arnold looked taller.
Yeah, I think it works though with Bean, and obviously that'll come to fruition when I talk about some of these other guys. Kurt Russell was another one,
Hmm.
and he was kind of like Kurt Russell. I'm assuming
Fresh off of Escape from New York.
is fresh off Escape, which I think is another tech noir one movie
Uh,
um, that I think James Cameron was taking inspiration from, and obviously he takes a lot of inspiration from John Carpenter, like I mentioned with Halloween and such.
loves.
Um,
You could tell from The Sims.
Yeah, and so I think if he really wanted to get Kurt Russell in this project, he had the connects. He
He
could have
could
done
have.
it. He could
He
have
could
done
have.
it.
Kurt Russell did Stargate. Come on.
Tommy Lee Jones is another one, and he Tommy Lee Jones wasn't
Well,
famous yet.
no,
He
it
had
wasn't until The Fugitive.
it was yeah, it wasn't until he started. Well, I'd argue it wasn't until he hit big with Steven Seagal in
Oh, and Under
Under
Siege.
Siege. Yeah,
Under Siege. You're right. You're right. That
because
did
that
come
was like
first.
91, 92, or something like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, but he wasn't famous yet. So it actually, I'm curious to see how that would have worked with Tommy
He
Lee
would have.
Jones.
He would have had to think up a pink sprinkled donut.
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
Every fox in, doghouse, outhouse.
and obviously there was a lot of other people, but the last one I'm going to name is Bruce Springsteen.
Oh,
I don't know how serious they were about that. I don't know how serious that was
I
being
mean,
considered.
you always hear about some musicians trying to get into acting.
Yeah, I know. I thought that was really interesting. I'd imagine. I would wonder how that ended up. But obviously, Cameron settled on Michael Bean because from the way Bean was working is he was able to convey the sensitivity that was needed for the human connection slash romance with Sarah, which I think really comes out whenever the two are spending time alone together, like under that underpass or in the motel. And now having seen,
Even when they're in the car.
even when they're in the car, Bean just has this way of coming off like even though everything he's saying is crazy, you believe him, and the way he's so passionate and
Hmm.
sincere towards Sarah is really incredible. And I actually have one of my favorite lines in the movie he says, but I'll get to that when we talk about our number one liners. Um, but let's see here. An interesting thing. I've got a couple of notes here about Bean's performance. But when he was getting uh,
Oh,
casted,
I was gonna bring this up.
when he was getting casted in the role, oh, do you want to go ahead and say it?
No, no, go ahead.
Okay. I was just gonna say when he was getting cast for the role, he was auditioning for the role. He was coming off of a Broadway performance where he had a country accent, and during his audition for Kyle Reese in the Terminator, he forgot that he was still using the accent. So when he left the audition, the casting directors were like, "We love this guy. We think he's great, but we just can't get past that accent." And his agent, they're telling us to his agent. His agent was like, "What accent?"
What are you talking about?
So they have to go back
That's so
and
funny.
go up to Michael Bean like, "What are you doing with this accent, man? It's so funny." But
I'm
he was,
sorry, I was acting.
yeah, I was acting. I'm sorry, I was really into it.
I
I,
thought
I didn't
I thought
know
the
that.
future everybody was Southern.
Yeah, I thought everybody was Southern in the future. Everybody square dances. It's so funny. Um, Another interesting thing about Michael Bean's performance is that to get into character, Bean studied the Polish resistance movement in World
That's
War
what I was
II.
gonna bring up.
Oh yeah. That's really interesting. Basically, for those of you that don't know, and obviously I didn't know this, I had to look it up. The Polish resistance movement in World War II was a resistance led by the Home Army that disrupted German supply lines and provided the British with intel reports from occupied areas. Which, saying that out loud, is obviously just kind of saying that's basically what Kyle Reese would have been doing in the future against the Terminators. So, pretty interesting.
And the kind of mindset you would need to go, or
Exactly.
everywhere you look.
Exactly. Um,
Making the pipe bombs, sawing off the shotgun.
yeah.
It all just comes together.
Yeah. No, it was great. No. Um, Now we can probably uh, get
Get into some of the
into.
categories.
Well, I was gonna say we can get into Arnold. I was gonna say some stuff about
Oh,
Arnold
okay,
because we've got the
let's have the
man,
Arnold
we've
conversation.
got the legend, Arnold Schwarzenegger. This is actually part
Hey,
of the reason we were.
we're gonna talk about him a lot.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he's gonna be on a lot of these episodes. So we don't have to spend too much time. We don't want to waste all of our
No,
Arnold
obviously,
facts.
no, but
But I
obviously,
like to
well, just for
definitely
this
talk about
movie.
the getting into the Terminator. All right, for the Terminator, of course.
Yeah. Um. Well, I just want. I mean, obviously, I thought this was really interesting. We were really gonna get into this movie. Um. When we were thinking about what movie we were going to do for our first episode, we were kind of debating between First Blood and Terminator, and then eventually we landed on Terminator. Pretty much
It's just so
solely,
it just rocks.
well, obviously it's a great movie, but pretty much solely because Arnold's in it, and it's like the thing that put him on the map. Because the thing that's really interesting
It's
is
he was already in Conan,
he
but
had
this is his breakout.
yeah
Everybody was saying I'll be back.
he had done Conan, uh, and this actually kind of gets into some of the interesting stuff about Arnold in this movie. He was filming the sequel, Conan the Destroyer, um, and the schedule for filming that was actually conflicting with the schedule for filming Terminator. But instead of recasting Arnold, James Cameron actually opted to push back the filming schedule for Terminator just to accommodate Arnold. Yes,
He knew he had lightning in a bottle.
Conan was epic. I just wanted to say that out loud.
I
No, Conan is
got
great.
them both on VHS. I won't attest. They're not great, but they're
I mean,
fun.
they're fun. Yeah, sure. Um, but anyway, so and another thing that's really interesting is Arnold really didn't appreciate this movie that he was making, The Terminator, up until he saw like the first 20 minutes of the rough edit, and then he realized that this was going to be something special. But he is famous for having said some pretty negative things about the movie before the movie had actually wrapped production. When he was on the set of Conan the Destroyer, he was being interviewed. Somebody had asked him, "Hey, what shoes are you wearing?" Because he was wearing shoes from the costume department of Terminator. He was on the Conan the Destroyer set. Somebody asked him, "What shoes are you wearing?" And Arnold said, "Oh, just some piece of shit movie I'm working on. Some piece of shit B movie, something along those lines." Uh,
He just didn't know yet.
he just didn't know yet, and
He had been
obviously,
pushing too many pencils.
we're gonna get to Predator. That's gonna be great.
Oh, it's coming up. Let me tell you.
Yeah, but no, I thought that was really interesting. Just all that stuff. Possible castings for the Terminator. Um, Mel Gibson, probably coming off of, I believe, Lethal Weapon. I believe Lethal Weapon had already come out by then.
Why, Mel?
Lethal Weapon. Oh no, Lethal Weapon is after this. I'm sorry. It just feels like such an early '80s movie, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It's grimy. I like it.
Up next, Sylvester Stallone. This is actually a pretty famous one
Of course.
that Sylvester Stallone passed on for yet another reason that a lot of people passed on this movie was because he thought it was just going to be a dumb B movie. Um, which is funny because I think about it.
The,
I think Sylvester Stallone probably. There's actually a funny joke in that movie, Last Action Hero, where they talk about like an alternate world where Sylvester Stallone was the Terminator,
I
and
love it.
and
It's so funny.
I keep thinking to myself, could Sylvester Stallone have done this role?
Imagine the lines.
I think his accent, funny enough, would have stuck out a lot more than Arnold's does in the movie.
Well, he only has like 17 lines of dialogue,
True. Yeah, he only speaks like 17
and they're all very
sentences.
short.
Very short. So it's like the accent probably wouldn't even be that big of a deal, but I feel like Sylvester Stallone, especially like I think it's one of those things where like obviously now we look back on it and it's one of those things. Thank you. And it's one of those things where uh like at the time it probably wouldn't have made that much sense because Sylvester Stallone was such a big celebrity at that point in time. And Arnold was like he was famous, like he had done like Pumping Iron and Conan and stuff like that, but I wouldn't say that he was like a household name yet. The way Sylvester Stallone probably was by that point, because we had already had Rocky, First Blood was already out. Um, oh, fun fact that just now reminded me of that. Um, Speaking of First Blood and Conan, because of the fact that Conan was pushing the Arnold working on Conan was pushing back the filming schedule for um, Terminator. James Cameron got assigned to write the script for Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Oh yes, I did read that.
Yeah, so James Cameron wrote the script for the First Blood sequel.
While he was waiting.
You're thinking of Twins, Marvelous Misadventure. You're thinking of Twins. Um, but yeah, so um, yeah, all that stuff was really interesting. I thought that was really cool. And then the last one, possible casting for the Terminator, I thought was really interesting. And this is kind of like something that's really famous at this point. That this is kind of like a famous quote that happened. But O.J. Simpson,
Oh yes, yes, I did see this, but he was too likable at the time.
he was too likable. James Cameron said that he did not think O.J. Simpson could play a killer. And then we play like the
Ah,
womp. We play the womp womp music, you know.
it's terrible. Oh, it's terrible. Why would you do it to him?
Obviously, we know how that happened. I won't say anything more about it. Just saying that was really interesting. Um, anyway, all right, let's see here. Oh, one more interesting. I'll just get into that when we get into
Interesting
that.
thing of note.
I was gonna say soundtrack. I just wanted to briefly mention. Obviously, this movie has one of the most famous movie
Slaps.
themes of all time. The
Ba-dum, bum, ba-dum. Ba-dum, bum, ba-dum.
yeah, no, that's a great one. Soundtrack was by Brad Fidel. The score was produced on a Prophet Company synthesizer. Cameron and Galen Hurd weren't sure about Fidel as he had only worked in TV and TV movies, but changed their tune when they heard the music. His other works include Fright Night, Terminator 2, and True Lies. Just a quick
Love it.
little, yeah, just a quick little. If you guys ever wondered where the theme for Terminator came from, that's where it came from. Um, okay, I still have some other notes, but I think we can just go ahead and we'll save the little interesting details for the last little bit. We can go ahead and get into our categories.
I'd love to see it.
Okay. Um, favorite still frame.
So I have this clocked in at 55 minutes and 33 seconds. If you pull that scene up, it is whenever he has cut his eye off, and it is
Mhm.
the shot of the eye with the skin around it.
Okay, nice. Like when he's in the hotel.
Yeah, yeah. When he's looking in the mirror, and it's
Yeah.
just whenever the camera turns around, and it's the close up of just the eye,
Okay,
and you
I
just see the
gotcha.
practice. It's because you don't see the full head model, so it's not as jarring
It's
when it's just
just
that little close up.
right,
It looks incredible.
right. Mine is that same scene, but looking at
Oh,
the
look at
fake
us,
head, the one with the
the
fake
fake
head.
head.
Yeah,
See, mine's so it's just a few seconds after.
yeah, yeah. This
That's
is
so funny.
that's so interesting. Yeah, it's. I'm glad you put the timestamp because I didn't put the timestamp, but I'm glad it works out
Yes.
in
So
both of our
so
favors.
it'd probably be 50, 55, 30 then.
Yeah, yeah.
It would be your timestamp.
And it's funny because like the head, obviously I can look at it now and be like the head doesn't look that great, but
But at the time,
I
that would be
like
incredible.
I love looking at it. Like it's so
Hmm.
appealing to the eyes. Like
It's
it's
back
not a
when we
bad
used to make
effect.
things in this country.
It's not a bad effect. It's just very Silicon Valley. You
No,
know what I mean?
no, yeah. But that's when we used to make things in this country instead of putting it into a computer,
Yeah, with our
know?
hands.
Yeah, with our hands. Dan Winston made that.
Yeah, he did. He did do that, and it actually looks really good. Uh, I think talking about the head for just a second. I think it's really interesting that something I never noticed before about the Terminator and watching this movie made me really, realize a lot of those things about it. Is throughout the movie. Thank you. Yes. Hi. Hi there.
Oh, I love you to do. Go get her.
She's hungry. Um, so something I thought was really interesting is that throughout the movie, you progressively see the Terminator's like his hair gets burned off. When he
He's got
goes,
no eyebrows at a certain part.
he's got no eyebrows going into the second half of the movie, and then especially when he gets to the police station, and the famous police station scene happens, his skin is really pale, and I don't know why. It took
Lost a lot of blood.
it exactly. I never knew this before, but apparently something had happened. So it's something that is not included in the movie. It's actually something that's it's a bit of detail included in the novelization actually, which I think was written by William Wisher, James Cameron's roommate at the time, who I had mentioned earlier. Uh, in the novelization, it talks about how the Terminator models, that specific Terminator model, the one that Arnold is, has an artificial heart that pumps blood throughout the areas that have skin covering the machine. And at one point, when Kyle Reese shot the Terminator, he had shot that heart, that artificial heart, and that's why throughout
Listen to this nerd reading the novelization of Terminator.
and that's why throughout the rest of the movie, the Terminator and his skin progressively gets like more and more like dead looking. It's actually,
Love it.
yeah, it's
Love the
actually,
little details though.
yeah, it's very interesting. So, anyway, that's what I just wanted to mention. I never noticed that before. Getting on to probably my favorite category, number one liners. Talk about your favorite one liner, and one liners are obviously very um, part and parcel to the action genre, but we've also just got whatever your favorite lines are in the movie. It doesn't have to be something said in a one liner tone. It could just be something you really like. You want me to go first?
So I was gonna say personally, I like there's all the classics. There's "Come with me if you want to live." "I'll
Yep,
be back."
yep.
I went a little bit funnier with this one.
Okay.
So specifically, whenever Arnold goes to get all of his guns from the gun store, he's sitting there, he's listing off all the names, the guy's giving it to him. He then starts to load the gun, and the
Yeah.
guy goes, "Hey, you can't do that in here." and just the delivery of Arnold pointing the gun at him and just going wrong always has stuck with me.
And what's even
So
funnier, that's a great line.
I'm going with that.
The
I'm just
delivery
going
on
with the
that,
wrong.
the delivery on that line is great too. And what's even funnier about that is later on in his career when he does the movie Commando, he does that exact line exactly like that again.
Oh yeah. Oh, he hits him with the "I'll be back" again.
In that same movie, yeah. No,
Yeah,
I'll be back. Definitely
and
became like,
even in the Running Man, he brings it back.
yeah, that definitely became like his line. I'd say besides "Get to the Chopper" and "I'll be back," those are probably his two biggest famous lines.
Oh yeah.
I actually have it written here. Hold on.
It's not a tumor.
It's not a tumor. "I'll be back" was voted number 31 in the American Film Institute's top 100 movie lines.
That's where it's at.
Yeah,
It's
I thought
obviously the choice, but I like wrong.
that's a good one. And you already mentioned some of the other ones, like "Come with Me If You Want to Live." That's a classic. Um, some of the other
Overdone
ones,
in every other movie after.
yeah, some of the ones you didn't
You hear it.
mention.
You hear it ever.
I had already mentioned this one, the "Fuck you, asshole" he gives to that janitor slash landlord guy. Um, that's just a really great. That's probably his best
That's just
delivery.
classic.
I mean, "I'll be back's" got the one of the best. I mean, honestly, Arnold kills every line in this movie.
Oh, it's amazing.
I don't think there's a single line he flubs, but that's probably because they don't give him that many lines. Anyway,
No, it's perfect.
oh, Sarah Connor's line, her last, her one liner of the movie, the "You're terminated, fucker," when she crushes the Terminator
Oh
with a
yeah, I do love
compactor.
that. I do love the delivery on it because there's like a small pause where she's like, "You're terminated, fucker."
Yeah, yeah. She doesn't say it like
I
it's a
love
great.
it.
She says it really like angry and aggressive.
Yeah,
Um,
like she wants that thing dead.
and Sear 1230. We're good. How are you? We're just talking about the Terminator. Um, and then another one, uh, that I actually really like. This is not from any of the main players. Instead, this is from Lieutenant Traxler, played by, I wrote it down here. Lieutenant Traxler. Oh my gosh.
I believe in you.
I know. It's somewhere.
Raffy stalling.
Ref. Ref. Maybe I didn't write it down. I thought I did. Well, then I feel bad. No, I don't. Hold on. Somewhere. You're in here somewhere. Budget. Came across. Ah, whatever. Anyway, Lieutenant Traxler in the movie, who I'll just look him up in a second. Lieutenant Traxler. Where the hell are you? Oh, here we go. Lieutenant Traxler, played by Paul Winfield. I just wanted to give him some credit. Uh, there's a funny line where he's talking with Lance Henriksen, who, side note, actually helped get the movie made because he was a good friend of James Cameron, who plays Hal Vukovich. It's basically the right hand man of Lieutenant Traxler in the movie. They're arguing back and forth. They're talking about the recent Sarah Connor murders and the different details of the murders. And what's funny is at one point, Lieutenant Traxler, who's literally holding the police report up to his face like this, and Lance Hendrickson is talking to him about all the different details. He pulls off his glasses and he says, "These work, you know." I just thought that I thought that was a really funny
That's a good
line.
line.
I thought that was a really funny
Yeah, that
line
got me too.
from somebody that is not technically part of the main cast, but I thought that was really interesting. And then there's another one that I didn't mention yet, but I didn't write it down in where I've got the category listed, but I went back to my notes and I saw it. One that's really interesting is "I came across time for you, Sarah." D- damn.
He's got my heart. He's got my
Damn.
heart.
My goodness. Well, I mean, just goodness gracious, that's a killer line right there. Like that hits. That's poetic. That's probably the first time someone has ever said something like that, and that just sounds really good when you
James
say it out loud.
Cameron. James Cameron wrote that. He put his pen down. He went for a long walk. He knew he did it.
He did it,
That's when he knew
man.
he was cooking with gas.
He killed it. Um, yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And I think that line, more than any other line, really illustrates the sincerity the what's the right word? I guess romance that Michael Biehn was able to bring to the role.
What I really like about this movie is that it is a B movie, but elevated to a different level because of the direction, because of the acting, because of the concept. It really should be just like a forgotten movie. You're like, oh yeah, that Terminator came and went, but instead they all put their heart into it, and you can really tell.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it was really great. But that yeah, those are the best lines in the movie. There's obviously a lot. There's a lot of great lines. You could probably make a whole list of movies that are just great based on that. But those are the ones that really stand out. Um, Next category: What would we do without you? This is where we basically talk about whether or not the movie would be the same without the main star. Could this movie work without Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator?
I don't know if it would have worked, but what I would have liked to see is get that Ivan Drago in the main role.
Ooh, get a little Dolph Lundgren in there.
I really think he could have done it. I think it could have been just as imposing. I don't know if they would have made all of the sequels or if people would have been quoting the lines just as much, but I mean, I stand around quoting "If he dies" all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I'll look at somebody, like I'll look at a kid crossing the street and be like, "Ah, if he dies, he dies."
That's a good one. No, I love that. Yeah, no, that's great. Um, Damn, that set me. Dolph Lundgren in the role. That's actually really good. He's got the height. He's got the
That was
stature.
because I was going through all of my '80s villains or just '80s action stars and just thinking about like who else really could have played the Terminator, who's staturing enough, who's scary enough, and I was like Dolph. He's
Dolph.
the guy.
He's the guy. That's good. No, that's really interesting. Um, I like that. That's funny because I was gonna say no. I was gonna say this movie can't work without Arnold because Arnold ties the movie together.
That's really what that's the real answer. But if you're just brainstorming, had to.
Dolph Lundgren could do it. Now, like you said, I don't know if it would have turned into a franchise because it's like something
Yeah, I
about
don't think
like
it would have been the same.
it's something
It
about
would have been a B movie with him.
it's like we talked about how there, Arnold has so few lines in the movie, but the lines he does have, his delivery is spot on.
Hulk Hogan, actually, he could have done
Who
it.
should dude? Yeah, you know what? They should have gone total balls to the wall. Just get Andre the Giant in there.
Can you imagine?
Just have the most. And that's what's so funny is because we didn't talk about this earlier, but like the Terminator is supposed to be like an infiltration unit. It's not supposed to be conspicuous,
Yeah,
and yet they've got 6'2", 275 pounds of pure muscle, Arnold Schwarzenegger,
yeah.
Mr. Olympia, in the role with his Austrian accent. And it's actually funny that James Cameron has gone on record saying he wasn't sure if it was going to work because it is such an outlandish idea. But I actually have a quote here from where are you? A quote by James Cameron when he was talking about uh, Schwarzenegger in the role. He said casting Arnold Schwarzenegger as our Terminator shouldn't have worked. The guy is supposed to be an infiltration unit, and there's no way you wouldn't spot a Terminator in a crowd instantly if they all looked like Arnold. It made no sense whatsoever, but the beauty of the movies is that they don't have to be logical. They just have to have plausibility. If there's a visceral cinematic thing happening that the audience likes, they don't care if it goes against what's likely. And I thought that was really interesting.
that's why he's a genius.
Yeah.
That's why he's a genius.
And it also just goes on to say that um, the movie. Um, he also said something about Arnold's accent, where he said something like, uh, uh, I have been trying to move the chat to the middle this whole time, and I just can't. I can't figure it out. Interact, move. It's not doing it. Wait, let me just go to docs. It's because I locked it. I'm so stupid.
You silly boy.
I'm a dummy. I'm sorry. Could have done that an hour ago.
You're so silly.
I know it. Anyway, um, anywho, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, he even said something
Talking
about
about the next James Cameron talk.
yeah, he even said something about how the accent uh kind of works too because it almost makes it sound like the like Cyberdyne system Skynet were just kind of experimenting and they were trying to work on giving the Terminator its own voice to have, and having the Austrian accent kind of makes it sound like it was just a work in progress,
Yeah,
which is funny because we've already mentioned this a dozen times. He doesn't talk that much in the movie, so you barely even recognize the Austrian accent. It just sounds robotic.
which is part of the performance, part of what he was going for, and that's it. Just it comes through.
It just works. It just
I'll be
works.
back.
Um,
And how fun is it just to say that?
it's great, especially trying to get it exactly the way he does it in the movie.
Hmm.
I think that really works. Um, Next category, cutting room floor. Talk about the deleted scenes or scenes we wish went a little bit longer. I've got a few here.
I
I mentioned this earlier, but I'll let you go ahead while I get the notes pulled up.
I was just gonna say I would I would have the assault on the police station. Once the fighting and gun starts happening and he crashes the car, just have that scene go for 5 minutes longer.
Oh yeah, that's a great scene.
Just keep it coming. Cut off some of the dialogue in the interrogation scene. That stuff's great. Cut
Yeah,
off like a minute or two of that and just give us some more cops getting thrown through windows, you know?
yeah, yeah. No, I love
That
that stuff.
rocks.
I love that
That scene's awesome.
That's so funny because I feel like a lot of those scenes, like the car chases, the action scenes we were just talking about, I feel like a lot of that stuff was impacted by the fact that a lot of the budget goes towards like the special effects and
No,
other
no, of
stuff,
course.
but apparently they didn't have a lot of permits for the movie.
Oh yeah.
So there's like a lot of scenes that seem to go by quickly because they have to, otherwise the cops are getting called
Oh
on
yeah.
them. I just thought that was really interesting.
Uh-huh.
She's asleep.
Mwah.
I love you.
Love you.
Um, but yeah, so like for instance, there was that scene, the last shot of the movie where Sarah's in the desert and she's driving away. Uh, they didn't have a permit for that, so they actually like bribed the police officer that had like asked them about it. They were like, "Hey, can you just like this will take like 5 seconds?" Oh no, they said that they were UCLA students. They were making a project for UCLA, and then so the cop was like, "All right, whatever." So they got away with it. But yeah, I agree. A lot of those scenes would have been really great. I've actually got a few here that I thought was really interesting. Um, let's see here. So here's some deleted scenes that were filmed or were intended to be filmed, but got left out of the final cut. Lieutenant Traxler believing more and more in Reese's story. So apparently, uh, real quick, I'm gonna answer a question in chat before I get into that. So the the first one actually has nothing to do with stopping Skynet. As the question in chat is, okay, so what the hell is the connection between the first one stopping the nuke and the other starting with the nuke? Terminator 1 is actually very interesting. Terminator 1's plot has nothing to do with preventing the future from taking place. It is all about conserving the future. Um, because Terminator 2 is really where they get into trying to prevent the future from happening and like all that stuff, and we won't really go into it today, but Terminator 1 is really all about just keeping Sarah Connor alive so that John Connor can exist in the future, because all that bad stuff is still going to happen in the future. But
And there's even a deleted scene where they do go to Cyberdyne.
yes, that is actually on my list that I was going to talk about. So before I get into that, Lieutenant Traxler, there's multiple scenes throughout the movie apparently during that interrogation scene that we were talking about, see, you wanted to get rid of some of the extra interrogation scenes. Apparently, there was more slotted in the
There's
script
even more.
where apparently throughout the interrogation process, Traxler was finding the story Reese was telling more and more believable. And then ultimately, when the Terminator,
All before it's too late.
all before it's too late, and ultimately when the Terminator comes in and starts busting up the police station, killing everybody, Lieutenant Traxler actually gives Reese his sidearm before he passes away, which is why later in the movie, Kyle Reese has that pistol with him. That's where he got the pistol from. They don't explain that in the movie, and I wonder if that was just like, I don't know if you'd consider that a flub or a plot hole. Yeah, I would just assume that he got the gun anywhere from the police station without having to explicitly say
Bodies
it.
everywhere.
Yeah, there's bodies everywhere, there's guns everywhere. He could have easily just grabbed a gun and took off with it. But that's where that gun comes from, especially specifically in my head when they get to the overpass and they stay the night at that under that bridge and they come out during the daytime. Kyle Reese is holding that gun in his hand. That's where the gun came from. It's supposed to come from a deleted scene where Lieutenant Traxler gave it to him. And a lot of these other deleted scenes that you had just mentioned about Cyberdyne and all that, they were included in the novelization. So Sarah
Love
finds
it.
the Cyberdyne building and tries to convince Reese to destroy it. But again, this goes back into what I was just talking about, where Reese doesn't want to go out of his way to destroy Cyberdyne because he's not trying to change the future, he's trying to conserve the future. Um, but then that kind of becomes a subplot of the novelization. That was intended to be a subplot of the movie, was going back and destroying Cyberdyne. Obviously, as we've mentioned before, with the omission of the T-1000, the Liquid Terminator, all that stuff is included in the sequel. Destroying Cyberdyne, the
You
second
got
Terminator,
you got to fulfill his original vision.
exactly. Which I think, being so inherently tied into the original vision of this Terminator, that's part of the reason why T2 is so good. It's just an expansion of what he initially wanted to do. Um, the factory the final battle takes place in is actually supposed to be Cyberdyne. And an employee is supposed to find the Terminator's microchip, which thus leads to Skynet.
Love it. And
Yeah.
we then again see follow up in T2.
See you later, Marvelous Misadventure. Hope you enjoyed it. Definitely be glad to have you back. But yeah, we're gonna keep going and hope you have a good night. Um, but yeah, so Skynet, uh, that obviously Cyberdyne obviously leads to Skynet. That's where that factory is supposed to take place. Thought that was really interesting. Sarah. Oh, I thought this one was really interesting. This one really like made my nuts clench. Um, Sarah and Kyle agree to blow up Cyberdyne, and that's why they were making the bombs in the first place. Those pipe bombs they were making in the motel. That was the original.
Perfect.
That's the original reason why they were making those bombs. I always thought it was because they were trying to make something strong enough to kill the Terminator.
I as well did. But that's just clever editing.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Clever editing. They just left that out. But those are all the deleted scenes that I have. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
I did I did not. You would hit all of them.
Hit all the major beats.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So next category, I'm just gonna get into some simple ones here. Um, best explosion.
I gotta go with the truck blowing up.
Yep, me too. The truck pipe bomb blowing up. Is that a medium? Does it not say? It's so tight though. Just go ahead and donate it. Thank you. Um, yeah, the truck pipe bomb. That's the one that I have too. That's probably the biggest and best explosion. I think that's the only explosion. Oh no, there's that car that explodes earlier in the
There's the
movie.
car that explodes, and then there's when the Terminator actually explodes.
Yeah, that's a good one too. I should have considered
Mhm.
that. But
It's a smaller one, but it's
the
spectacular.
one that sticks with me is obviously the one with where the
You
truck
gotta go with the
explodes.
truck.
Interesting note about that, and I say that all the time, like I'm a broken record. I don't mean to keep saying
Interesting things of note.
that. Actually, um,
In the book.
So the other thing I mentioned earlier, how the production company Orion didn't were mostly hands off, but they did give some input as to what James Cameron should do for the movie. I already mentioned that they had asked him to reinforce the relationship between Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor, and he did that. But the other thing that they asked him to do was to end the movie at the truck explosion.
He's not going to do it though.
No, he didn't do it. He said, "Fuck you guys." Yes, no, he didn't. He didn't do that, obviously. And then we still had the whole factory and stuff. Um, I don't know how I would have felt if the movie had died, if the movie had ended right after the truck explosion. I just don't know if I don't think it would have had
It
the
probably would have
impact.
been. It wouldn't have been as satisfying, but it would have had the more stereotypical ending.
I think it works more in the factory because it gives Sarah the final blow. She's the one that kills the Terminator.
Of course,
I think that
it's
works.
always got to get up one more time.
Like Kyle Reese, he did his job. He's like protecting Sarah, but then I think it's really poetic how by the end of the movie, Sarah has to protect herself.
Of course.
And I think that really works out for that theme that they were going for. If you want to call it a theme, I don't know. I'm just saying that I just thought that was really smart.
Okay. No, yeah, it's
Next
good storytelling.
next on the block, best stunt. I've got two.
You got two. I like the car chase. I don't know if that technically classifies as a stunt,
Which one?
but I think the one where they're in the parking garage and then
Mhm.
onto the street.
And then he's chasing him in the police car.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
that's
that
a good
one's
one.
real good. There's a lot of good driving.
I almost included that one based on how the police cruiser crashes into the wall at the end of the scene.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Um,
yeah.
I almost did that one, but I kind of just didn't because I don't think there was anybody in the car when it crashed. It's still really cool. But I kind of wanted to give credit to um, the scenes where I knew somebody was getting their shit rocked.
Oh, of
Um,
course, of course.
so the two that I have, and I kind of go like one way or the other. Some days I feel like this is my favorite stunt. The other days I feel like the other one's my favorite stunt. Um, the pickup truck that Sarah and Kyle are driving, and Terminator's chasing him on the motorcycle. When it flips, I like that stunt a lot. The pickup truck flipping. That's a good stunt because you can see somebody's actually there's two people in the cab when it flips. You can obviously tell they're stunt doubles because Sarah Connor suddenly turns into a very manly man. Hi.
Are you ready?
To get rid of it.
Those are.
That was our first. That was a.
But it's okay.
I mean, I just don't. It just don't do it for me anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't work on me anymore.
Yeah, it's too small.
I know. I'm too big and fat.
No, you're not fat. You're muscular. He's muscular. Okay? He's not a big back.
Yeah, I'm a Big Mac.
No, I'm a big back.
Turn around, baby. Let me see that big back.
Shut up. I love you.
I love you too.
Mwah. Hi, Lincoln.
Bye.
He said bye. He meant to say hi. He said bye.
I did say hi.
Oh, it sounded like he
Lincoln
said
went
bye.
to jail.
Yeah.
Look, you went to jail.
Yeah. For some reason, that's just what my daughter thinks is funny. Um, the other one I had was the character, very minor character, Matt, Ginger, Sarah Connor's roommate's
Oh,
boyfriend.
he's hilarious.
Matt getting thrown around in the bedroom. I thought that was a really funny scene where the Terminator just comes into Sarah Connor's apartment through the bedroom window and
I like
just
the I like the cross cutting where she's making the ridiculous amount of food
she's making
and he's
she's
dying.
she's making the biggest sandwich on earth, and she's got like the headphones on, and she's like doing the gyrating and the ooh, 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 yeah, and like there's the iguana like running
It's so
around.
great.
It's so silly, and this dude
Back to when people had crazy pets.
yeah, like an iguana. Yeah, Sarah Connor had an iguana. She doesn't keep the iguana by the end of the movie, unfortunately. I guess he disappeared. I guess the Terminator got him. Um,
Probably crawled out the window.
okay, I had it right here. I just wanted to give credit where credit is due. Pete Turner is the stunt double for Michael Biehn and Rick Rossovich. Rick Rossovich being the actor Matt. Just want to give credit to Pete Turner. Pete Turner, you took a fucking beating in that scene, buddy.
Love it. He's a good guy.
But I love that scene because he's getting thrown through. He's getting thrown through a dresser. He's getting thrown through that mirror, and then eventually when Ginger's carrying the sandwich back to the bedroom, and then he gets just blasted through the door. I thought that was a really
It's
good scene.
perfect.
That's my favorite. Yeah, that was a good one. That was a good one. Up next, we've got best fight slash action sequence. And that's kind of one of the reasons I try to keep best explosion, best stunt off to themselves, because we've got whole action sequences or fight sequences.
Full action sequences.
And I think you and I can probably unilaterally agree the best action sequence in the whole movie is the police station shoot up.
Oh, it's pretty great.
That's my favorite one. I don't know if there'd be another
I
one
think
that
it's
comes
pretty
close.
I mean, there's not the one that comes close, but I like when she's crawling away from the Terminator. Wouldn't necessarily consider an action sequence, but I more like the most suspenseful sequence.
That's a good one. That's
But
definitely
I
the
just
most.
think I just think that few minutes where she's crawling and it almost gets the ankle, and then it does get the ankle, she's got to kick it away.
Yeah.
I just think that like works so well.
Yeah, that one's really close. That's a good one. That's a good scene. There's a lot of good scenes in the movie. But that one I think is definitely the best action oriented scene. I mean, the way it starts off
Oh.
with a bang, the "I'll be back" line, the
Crashes through the whole
the car
entrance.
crashes through the entrance, and then he just comes in, he just starts blasting. I love that one part. It's such an underrated part. I love how he goes to the electrical box, he rips out that wire, and he sticks the end of the wire into the electrical box and shorts out the lights in the building.
It's just so good.
So great.
It makes so much sense without even having to tell you what he's doing.
I know, I love it. And that's just so great. Super suspenseful too. It has like the suspense from the factory scene involved too, because Sarah's hiding, she's scared, she doesn't know what's gonna happen, and then Kyle shows up, and at first you don't know if it's the Terminator or Kyle, and then it's Kyle, and you're just like, oh, thank God, and then that's just where shit just pops off one after the other, and I love it. I love I love the whole police scene. I love, where he's talking to the psychiatrist. I love where he's like freaking out. I love where Sarah's
it's
trying to calm
exposition
down.
done right.
Yeah, and then obviously the way it caps off with Arnold coming in and killing everybody is really great. If you had anything else to add to that category, we're going to move on.
No.
Up next is Overacting Anonymous. Who is the best or your favorite overactor in the movie?
Oh, it's got to be the three punks at the beginning.
I was gonna say
all three of them are going for it.
I was gonna say, yep. I got Bill Paxton right here.
The young Bill Paxton.
Bill Paxton, who obviously
starting the trifecta.
He would go on to be in his own trifecta of being killed by a Terminator, an alien, and a predator.
It's just the perfect career.
However, I actually recently learned that it is actually more likely that Bill Paxton survived his encounter with the Terminator, because we only see one person out of that trio actually getting killed.
But we also only see one person run away.
That's true. So Bill Paxton, his character could have he could have just been injured and knocked unconscious. It's possible, but there's no definitive way of knowing whether or not he actually got killed. But we assume he did for the sake of the trifecta. For the sake of the trifecta, it's okay.
He at least fought all three.
He fought. We say fought. He got his ass kicked.
He lost, but
I love that too, because I actually just put it together. The way when Bill Paxton says "fuck you, asshole" to the Terminator, I kind of take that, and in my head canon is that the Terminator cataloged the speech he learned from the because those are the three people he meets when he first comes back through the
oh yeah, for sure.
My head canon is that he takes into consideration, like, he catalogs what they say, and then that's why later on in the movie he considers it as a possible response.
Oh, of course, because even when we first meet him in that scene, he's repeating what the three punks are saying to him in the first place.
Yeah, I love
he's building the catalog.
I love that. That's so good.
And then it even continues on to the second one whenever John's teaching them all the lingo.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's so
Hasta
cool.
la vista, baby.
Exactly. I think it's one of the things that's so cool about the Terminator as
It can
it
learn.
learns. It's a learning machine. It adapts. It does all these cool things. What is that one? What do my current pants say? That's okay. Let me see those. I think I am a 36. Well, these are a little elastic. These, I think these work. But yeah, I think you're right about the 36. Yes. Thank you. What was I saying? Bill Paxton? Learning machine.
Yes.
Okay.
It can learn.
Yeah, that's what makes the Terminator so threatening. I also just want to give a quick shout out to Bess Mata. Hope I'm saying that right. She's the actress that plays Ginger. Just want to give her a quick shout out. I thought the whole gyrating with the headphones thing on was a good little.
Oh, I love a good scene where somebody's got headphones on and can't hear the commotion in the next room. It always works.
The
It always
absolute
works.
thunderstorm of shit going on just next door. It's so interesting to me. But yeah, I thought I should give her a shout out. But yeah, got that one spot on. Speaking of spot on to our next category. We've got the new category. I didn't tell you about this, but I'll lead the charge.
Oh, I got no
I'll
notes.
lead the charge on this one. Spotlight cameo. We talk about a cameo in the movies that we just wanted to give a quick shout out to slash spotlight to. I've got two to make up for the fact that you probably didn't have one because I didn't tell you about it till we
I
did
did
this.
not.
Chino Fats Williams. He was the guy driving the truck when the Terminator first came through the time warp. I wanted to briefly mention him because he is a guy I see all the time in action movies. He was in
The guy who's in the garbage truck.
Yep, the guy that was driving the
Yeah.
garbage
Okay.
truck.
Yeah.
He made a cameo in this movie. He made a cameo in Roadhouse, where Patrick Swayze gives him the keys to his car right before he heads to Missouri for the first time. He has a major. He plays a side character, but it's a bigger role in Action Jackson. Action Jackson being the inspiration for the name of this podcast.
Love it.
And then he had 3 roles that were uncredited in the Rocky movies.
Love to see
So
it.
I'd have to rewatch Rocky 1, 2, and 3 just to
We'll look for
see
him.
him again. But
Hey, we'll have those episodes.
yeah, maybe I'm still on the fence about that.
All right, we'll see.
And then up
At least
next,
4.
is Dick Miller. Dick Miller was famous in the 80s, 70s for having like small roles. He was in a lot of small roles throughout the movie. He was in this movie. He was in Small Soldiers. He was in Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, and he was also in Gremlins and Gremlins 2 to a lesser extent. You'd probably have to like see his face. He's the gun store owner in this movie. He's the guy that gets shot.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's who I would have said as the cameo. I don't know his name, but I've seen him a lot.
It's Dick Miller. And yeah, you've seen him a
Love
lot.
it.
It's Dick Miller. For those of you that know who we're talking about, it's Dick Miller. He's a great guy. Up next in the categories is Second Comers. We've got who is your favorite actor outside of the main trio, the main actors? Who is the actor that you just want to give a quick shout out to for, being the guy?
Being the guy, it was probably the gun store owner because as I was watching, I was like, I know him.
Yeah.
I know this guy. Either him or what was the second detective's name?
It was Val Hukic. I forget how you pronounce that. It was Lance
Val Hukich. Yeah,
Hal Vukovich. It's Lance Henriksen who plays the
yeah,
android in Aliens.
that's what I was gonna say because I like him a lot in the as the android.
Yeah, he does really great in that
And then
role.
he also comes back in AVP
He does, doesn't
as
he?
the financier.
Yep. Yeah, he kind of his role kind of becomes the aliens. He kind of becomes the alien guy.
Mhm.
Mine is Earl Bowen. Earl Bowen, who plays the psychiatrist.
Oh yes. Who
Or,
also comes back in the second one?
oh, I'm sorry, the psychologist, the criminal
Psychology.
psychologist, not
Gotta
the
get it right.
psychiatrist. He plays Dr. Peter Silberman, the criminal psychologist, and he is the only other guy besides Linda and Arnold to return in Terminator 2.
And he does a great job when right before T100 or T1000 shows up.
Yeah. I also had like another category on here. I didn't know how it was going to work, but we'll just kind of shoot it. This is the last category we have. Movie memories. Share any memories you have with this movie. And I was going to let you start because
So
I didn't really write anything down.
hey, that's all right. I just wrote down watching this on cable because I remember the very first time I saw it. I was a 10 or 11, and it was just a rerun on cable. And it was one of those things when it's growing up, you're in the pop culture, you've just heard Terminator.
Right.
You've heard the name, and then the old TV guides saw it was coming up. Nobody was home. I was like, 8 o'clock, let's run it.
Yeah.
And I just remember watching on cable. The title card comes up, says that it's going to be in 2027. Feels like forever from now, at the time at least.
Oh,
And
I
then we
know.
just hear the bottom bump bottom bottom bump bottom, and I was locked in.
Yeah, it's funny to think that the future that the movie talks about takes place in 2029. So we've got 5 years until Skynet just takes over.
I mean, we probably got less time than that.
Well, no, because yeah, doesn't Kyle say that he was born after the war started? And he's like,
Hmm.
and Kyle's official age in the movie is supposed to be 21.
Yeah.
So
So he was
Kyle's
born into the darkness.
so he was
He
already
never
born,
saw the light.
which means that technically Skynet would have already had to have taken over.
Yeah, I think in the second one they say that 97 is whenever Judgment Day happens.
Yeah, because Terminator 3 ends with Judgment Day happening.
The bomb's going. Yeah, the
Yeah,
bomb's going up.
yeah. Yeah, no thank you. No thank you to the person in chat. I appreciate it, but I'm good. Um anyway, um so yeah, I mean in terms of memories, it's so funny because I feel like I've just always been watching Terminator. I don't really remember the first time I
It's just
saw it.
always been there.
I don't remember the first time I saw it. I don't really remember. I don't remember the time I saw it before this last time I saw it. Because it feels like I've just always seen Terminator. It's kind of one of those things where it's also like it's one of those movies that like you were talking about, you know it. It's one of my favorite terms. It's cultural osmosis where like even if you've never seen Terminator, you've seen Terminator.
Yeah.
Just
If
be
you've never seen Jaws, you know what the soundtrack sounds like.
exactly. Like you get it. You've experienced it in some form or fashion. You understand it. You comprehend it. You get it. So I can't really say for sure. Like I don't really have any like strong memories with it. I think the only thing I can think of is just some of the memories I have of some of the other movies. Um, I think it's just really interesting because I remember the time you talked to me. I remember the time you were talking to me about how Terminator 1 is better than Terminator 2. I'm trying to remember that for the first time because I thought that was really
I
interesting.
I remember it had to have been back in the old apartment days, but uh I remember it was because somebody else had told me that the Terminator 2 was like the best sequel of all time.
Right.
And I said, not only is it not the best sequel of all time, it's not even better than the original. And and
well,
that's just something that I'll die on.
well, wait.
Obviously,
What is supposed to be
the
the best
second one.
sequel then?
I mean, you could say Empire Strikes Back could
Okay,
be the best sequel of all time.
I guess.
I think I think that's the one that most people would argue.
Now, do you think that's
Uh,
stronger than T2 because of your feelings towards
I think
T1?
so.
Okay.
No, I mean, Empire just is a better movie than Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you that. It's better than New Hope for sure. For sure. I mean,
Yeah.
but I
Off the
mean,
top of my head,
I guess that's what a sequel's supposed to do. I guess that makes sense. Because I was thinking about it in terms
yeah.
of like, I mean,
Because
it's
most of the time, a sequel is a dwindle in uh like how good it is. You know.
that kind of brings me to uh, what I was going to say next. I guess being about how Terminator One. I think the reason T2 is such a great movie is because Terminator One is such a great movie, and Terminator Two does a lot of great things in and of itself. Um, but then you get into Terminator One, and I think one of the things I really like about Terminator One is that it just feels like such a when I think about specifically the time travel stuff, this is what I think about. Terminator 2 always kind of rubbed me the wrong way because it was always this idea that you can change the future. And I
Yeah.
think what I liked about Terminator 1 is there's kind of this misunderstanding of how time travel works. Um, because in like quantum physics, they have something called a causal loop, which is
Which
where,
is how I think all time travel should work.
right,
Is at least in narrative format. This is the one that works the best.
like it's the idea that the events of the movie that take place were always meant to take place.
Yeah. There
Like,
was no way that's like the deleted scene where the employee finds the robot. The only
yeah,
reason that the robot was there to kill Sarah Connor, so that's how it got created in the first place. And the only reason that that Reese was there was to protect Sarah, but she got pregnant, and that's who sent him back. Like it was all a loop
it
that
was
couldn't happen
all
unless all of the things happened in the first place,
exactly.
which is the much more believable, easier to digest story format in time travel that I think most narratives should have. The changing time travel, changing the future, changing the past type stuff, I'm not interested in.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of one of those things where like it's not. I don't know. What is Kyle Reese says something in the movie where that I thought was really interesting though because it kind of calls into question a lot of this stuff. He says something along the lines of what did he say? I pulled it. Let me pull it up right here. Um, he says something along the lines of how. Oh, I put it in my note. I put it in a separate set of notes. Silly me. Yeah, so when Reese is talking to Sarah in the car in the parking garage while they're hiding from the Terminator, he says something I thought was really interesting. I'd never caught it before, and I caught it on this most recent rewatch. He says, "One when Sarah asks him, 'Are you from the future?' and Reese says, 'One possible future.'" It's like he's confused. He says, "One possible future from your point of view, I don't know." Which I thought was
Which is
really
just
interesting
incredible.
because then it calls into the possibility that by Reese going to the past, that he likely isn't changing the future or he isn't conserving the future. Because like let's say Reese goes into the past and Sarah Connor dies, right? Well, if we operate because this is basically multiverse theory at this point,
Yeah.
does that
A
basically
split fracture universe.
yeah, does that mean that the future still happens? Because if Terminator goes back in time, Kyle Reese fails, Sarah Connor dies, does that mean that the Terminator never existed in the future because the Terminator is still alive, right? Or Kyle Reese, does he just vanish because now the future's like changed or whatever? Or do we have an alternate future now based on this current version of Sarah Connor moving forward? That how does that change things? Very interesting.
It's just silly. I'd rather just have it be the one movie loop instead of getting into all the nonsense.
Right.
But that's just me. I also just am a much bigger fan of a more indie style first debut film. I've gotten more into liking those films than when they do get a budget these days. Like I'm
Right.
more of a fan of like Shyamalan or Quentin or Nolan when they had a smaller budget.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Before they got a little bit too crazy and started making Avatar movies for 20 years, you know what I
oh
mean?
God, don't even get me started. That's the thing about James Cameron going forward. Um, real quick, tell me if I put a compressor over the mic. Tell me if it's knocking still, because that was that was like the whole thing that was messing up this podcast in the first place was the mic knocking, doing the ticking.
Well, I haven't noticed any.
You haven't
I haven't
noticed it,
noticed any this whole time.
but that's because are you watching the stream? Oh, okay, it's good now. Okay, thank you.
I did I was gonna say I did every once in a while, but I didn't notice it.
That's okay. Okay, so that's pretty much it for that stuff. I do just have like a few interesting things I thought it'd be good to close out with. Um,
Hit me with them.
okay, this is a big one. I thought was really interesting. Um, the term T800, which is the term usually associated with the model that Arnold Schwarzenegger is, the term T800 is not used at all in this movie, which I thought was really interesting. However, Kyle
That is
Reese
interesting.
Kyle Reese does mention the 600 series, which would have been the model right before Arnold's,
The one with the rubber
the
skin.
one with the rubber skin, the one that was more easily detected by the dogs. The term T800 was not officially used until Terminator Salvation in 2009, the fourth movie in the
Crazy.
series. The only so I guess I don't know how you would say this because I'm not a big car guy, but Kyle refers to the Terminator by its model, like its make and model, but not like its type. He doesn't say T800, but he does say he does refer to it as Cyberdyne Systems 101, model 101. That's
Interesting.
the only official title the Terminator is given outside of Terminator and then Infiltrator on top of that. So yeah, I really thought that was cool. Another thing that's really interesting, Franco Columbo, who was a fellow colleague of Arnold Schwarzenegger in the bodybuilding industry, plays the future Terminator that infiltrates the human camp during Kyle's story that he's telling to Sarah when they're under the bridge.
Love to see it.
Yeah, so we can assume that was probably a T600 or T800, hard to say. He doesn't really refer to it.
Dogs did not like them.
Yeah. But I actually, speaking of that, I also did notice that when the Terminator was heading to the motel that Connor and Reese were staying at, there's a German Shepherd outside that is barking at him. So I wonder if it is that
Little
dog.
attention to detail.
Yeah, I wonder if it is that dogs can still sense that there's something wrong with the T800s. It's just that
Oh, they do.
it's just that
They
when
definitely do
it's
because
just
it comes up a few
it
times. I
comes up a
feel
few
like.
times, yeah. Especially when at the end of the movie, when Sarah's in her Jeep and she's, driving around, she has a German Shepherd with her.
Mm-hmm.
Almost as like a new paranoia unlocked.
A new alarm song.
She has to,
Yeah,
yeah, she has
a
to
new
she has to
alarm.
keep a dog with her. That dog, that German Shepherd that is at the hotel, that is actually James Cameron's dog.
He knew. He knew that he needed one for protection.
Yeah. The Terminator vision, the vision where from the Terminator's point of view it's all red and there's all a bunch of text and stuff, that is actually just a dump of the ROM assembler code for the Apple II.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's actually incredible.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Never knew that before. I already mentioned Kyle Reese is supposed to be 21. Sarah Connor is supposed to be 18, going on 19.
And just has an apartment in LA,
I thought that was so weird.
working as a
She's
waitress.
18 years old and she has an apartment
I
in
didn't.
LA.
Yeah,
So crazy.
I didn't make that connection until you just said that.
Yeah, so odd. So odd. And that's why her mother always calls her and is really, really
She's
worried
like,
about her.
"How are you? How's the drug trade going? Is it? Are you paying your bills?
Are you okay? Do I have to worry about?
How?"
Yes. It's 1980s LA and your 18-year-old daughter is out there by herself with a roommate. yes, you should be worried.
There's a killer robot actor. What do you mean?
Even before that, I mean, come on.
Yeah, for real.
Let's see here. Um, I already mentioned how Orion, the production company behind Terminator, did not have any interest in the movie, but were just kind of going with it, thinking they could turn a quick buck over it. Um, but they also,
Little did they know.
but they also, after seeing the movie, thought it was terrible. Apparently,
Oh yeah, they didn't have a press screening.
yeah, they apparently had a very limited press screening because they had so little faith in the movie. They didn't like the movie, and they actually poured a lot of their effort into a movie that was running adjacent to Terminator, which was called Amadeus. Another film that I actually watched very recently. Amadeus was a movie about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and I guess you could say it kind of worked out in Orion's favor because Amadeus would go on to win a bunch of Academy Awards, including Best Picture.
Hilarious.
Yeah,
Hilarious.
thought that was really cool. Um, and then I've got one more big note slash story that I thought was really interesting. I wanted to go over it. Um, so this is actually when you think of Terminator, you don't really think of like controversy, right? It's such a classic movie. It's been around for like 40 years. Everybody loves this movie, but controversy is not necessarily something that is associated with the movie. However, during my research for the show, I discovered that there was actually a bit of controversy that was surrounding this movie. So there was a writer named Harlan Ellison who had claimed that the film was a blatant ripoff of his short story slash episode of Outer Limits called Soldier. Harlan Ellison was
Oh yes, I did see this.
yeah,
Because
so
then he even said that he had presented the idea to Cameron.
Cameron claims that he had never seen the story or anything like that. Um, and Cameron maintains that his script is wholly original and was not at all influenced by Harlan Ellison's work. However, Harlan Ellison threatened to sue production company Orion uh, if for some kind of reparation and plagiarism if they were not to settle in court. They settled in 1986 for an undisclosed amount of money. They never said how much money it was. I guess they wanted to keep it under wraps. Cameron was against the idea of settling, believing he did nothing wrong, but Orion threatened him with paying their legal fees if they ended up losing the lawsuit. So James
Can't be
Cameron,
doing it to him.
yep. So James Cameron would end up uh, giving in on that front. However, he does maintain that it was a bunch of bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really
I do too.
interesting because I started looking into it. I started looking into the episode in question of Outer Limits that Harlan Ellison is talking about called Soldier. For those of you who don't know, Outer Limits is basically a Twilight Zone type show from the 1960s. This is season 2, episode 1, Soldier. The basic plot summary is that there are two soldiers from the future, way, way into the future, way more into the future than Terminator's dystopian future, where there are two soldiers from warring factions that are fighting each other. They get hit with some kind of energy and are transported back to 1964 England, where one of the soldiers uh, meets up with a scientist. They kind of like do some talking, and that soldier goes and lives with that scientist and his family for a little bit. And eventually, the other soldier from the future tracks him down and tries to kill him, and they end up killing each other. And it's supposed to be like a big theme about whether or not the oh gosh, soldier was soldier from the soldier from the future is that was staying with the family is was he really like all about killing or was he trying to protect the family and just it's a bunch of crap. Basically, from what I understand, it has nothing to do with Terminator. It has nothing to do with the plot of Terminator outside of the fact that there are two individuals from the future that get transported to the past and end up fighting each other. That's it. There are no robots. There is no conspiracy to kill someone from the past in order to save the future, which I think are like the two big things. I think the idea of two. I think it's the fact that Kyle Reese, who was a soldier, got sent back to the past is like the main thing that Harlan Ellison was griping on. But I feel like that's such a crap thing
Such a weird.
that's such a
Yeah.
weird thing to bitch about. And yet somehow it ended up working in his favor because he got I assume at least a couple $100,000 from Orion because of it.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. I'll actually have to take some time to watch the episode. I wanted to watch it before we hopped on the show, but I just didn't have time. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Very much so.
I think that's it from me. Unless you have anything else you
Oh
wanted
no,
to
I've
talk
been done
about.
with my notes.
Yep, I think that'll do it. So yeah, Terminator 1984. Great movie. Love the action. One of the quintessential movies leading into the modern
Top
era
10.
of action. Oh, actually, I did have some. You know, I don't even think it's worth it. We already talked a lot about the movie. I was going to talk about some of the reviews from the contemporary era, 1984, but I just don't think it's worth it at this point. We already talked enough about the movie.
You're good.
But yeah, no, the movie was great. I'd say in terms of movie 80s action movie, or I guess just movies in general, but I say early 80s movies because I feel like there are a handful of early 80s action movies that kind of set the standard for what future movies are going to follow by. And, you know, it completely changed the action genre, and I would say Terminator is one of those. I can think of four off the top of my head. You might be able to help me round out a top five here, but Terminator, uh, Raiders of the Lost Ark, First Blood, Mad Max 2, Fury Road, or I'm sorry, Road Warrior. And I feel like those four,
No
like
Predator.
Predator was 87.
Oh yeah, you're right.
We're talking about early 80s action movies that would set the standard for the future. But I feel like those four kind of cover a lot of those bases.
No, yeah, for sure.
Terminator, First Blood, Mad Max 2, Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think we got it.
I think we got it.
All right, that's going to do it here, folks. We're just going to sign off. And the next one we're going to be doing is First Blood. So that'd be cool.
So excited.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we'll see you guys next time, and hope you have a good one.
Have a
Peace.
good one.